Hello, everyone. Welcome to Growth Stage, podcast by FastSpring, where we discuss how digital product companies grow revenue, build meaningful products, increase the value of their business. I'm your host, Jesse Poliato. I love being part of the community, and I love bringing the best of the community to you here on the podcast. Today, we have with us Hank Hoffmeyer from Kickbox. I'm so pumped to have him here. Email marketing is often hailed as the highest ROI channel for marketing, especially in SaaS and digital businesses. But what happens when your emails don't even make it to the inbox? So in this episode, we're going to talk with Hank. He's director of operations, but the email deliverability evangelist, more importantly, at Kickbox, about how authentication, verification, deliverability impacts your bottom line. So we're going to learn why deliverability is no longer a set it and forget it process, and how to fix common mistakes that could be silently killing your campaigns and communications. Hank, thanks so much for being here today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. It's exciting to be here and talk about email marketing and how it's a crucial role for any type of company.
Absolutely. I know we were joking for a second before we hit record that it can sometimes feel like the dark art off in the corner of like, how does that all happen? So today we're going to reveal the dark arts or whatever. I don't know. Something like that. Can you, just to get us kind of into it, can you talk a little bit, why is email still such a higher ROI channel, if I can spit that out, and especially for SaaS companies or digital companies?
Right. Interestingly enough, I like to do videos almost every day on various social media platforms, short form. And I did one this morning, and it was did you know? And it was, did you know that email marketing, the first marketing email was sent in 1978 and made $13 million. And I was encouraging people, it's Monday, but you might not make $13 million, but send an email. Yeah. Yes, it is the marketing channel of choice by people that know what they're looking at when it comes to numbers. It's the most affordable, provides the highest ROI, and most importantly, and this is coming out more and more, I've heard it over the last few years, but more importantly, I've heard it in the last few months at conferences, is it's an owned audience. You own your audience. Of course, you have to upload it to a platform to send emails, but you can take it, it's portable. If you're on social media and you do something wrong or don't do something wrong, but you get reported, you can have your account suspended, banned, or killed. You just lost that audience. It's called rented land. A lot of people do marketing on rented land on Facebook. If you're running ads and then doing posts and boosting your posts and you get your account suspended, you just lost that audience. With email marketing, like I said, you own that audience. You could stay in touch with them. You can make it feel like a personalized one-on-one conversation through the use of personalization and merge data. And it just, to me, it's a no-brainer to either just get started or go back and revisit what you're doing if you feel like that has fell off of a cliff or something. More and more I have these conversations and get people excited about bringing email back into their platforms and their marketing efforts again.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, has there been any changes over the last few years? Has anything kind of modified, or is it still the same game as it was from 10 years ago? And is there anything that like founders or marketers should be thinking about, like, hey, this is how the world has evolved?
There's been changes, and then there's a lot of fundamentals that people don't even know about. You mentioned like dark arts and people don't know. And oftentimes I go to conferences and I talk about the basics and getting things set up and doing it right so that you are successful right away. And it amazes me how many people in the audience are new to email marketing or have been doing it for a while, but just don't know some of the things that I end up talking about. And when I started at iContact, which is a sister company to Kickbox, we're both owned by Ziff Davis, I went into account management. I said, I know how email works, right? You get a list of subscribers, you create an email, you send it, and you make money. It's not that easy. You mentioned it. First, your email needs to get to the inbox. It needs to be viewed. Yeah. And first and foremost, you need to have a valid email address to send to. And that's where Kickbox comes in, is we validate email addresses. Now, a lot of times people say, okay, well, I'll upload a list or I'll connect it to my HubSpot and validate my email addresses. Or HubSpot said, hey, my list is old, may have a lot of email addresses that are no longer valid, and they're going to recommend that I go to Kickbox to clean my list. And that happens. Yeah. And sure, by all means do that. But the missing link, as I call it, is verifying it when it first comes in. Let's say you have a sign-up form. A lot of your audience probably has a website. Maybe you have a sign-up form or you're looking to add one. You should be doing that on the fly. If I fill out the form on your website and I put, hank@gnail.com, and I spell it with an N by mistake. I fat finger it, right? The
Yeah.
form, if set up correctly with an API, can say, did you mean Gmail? And automatically allow them to correct it. Or if I type in hankfg@gmail.com and I didn't mean to put the FG and it's an invalid email address, it'll say, this is an invalid email address. Please try again. Customers like Citibank, Major League Baseball, and Reddit use us in that manner. Not saying only big companies can do that. We also have some partners that work with us to work with WordPress forms, with Gravity forms, small companies, and they're able to do that. You can use the API. Anybody can use the API. But first and foremost, validate your email addresses. Then decide if you want to use what's called risky email addresses, like disposable email addresses. Those are on the rise. That's one thing that's changing. Then there's role email addresses like admin at and marketing at. Now, why is that dangerous? If somebody signed up for marketing at whatevercompany.com, maybe I signed up for your email using that email address. And then 3 months later, I leave the organization. And then you, Jesse, you're checking the emails because you got that new responsibility. And you say, I didn't sign up for this email. I don't remember it. And you mark it as spam or, unsubscribe from it. It's up to you and the type of business you're in, whether or not that's important. And it also depends on other things as far as your engagement rates. But those are things to look for: disposables, the role addresses, and then there's the free. Like, do you want to accept Gmail, Yahoo, Microsoft, or do you not? Do you only want B2B domains? And you might see that. You may fill out a form and it'll say, please provide a business email because you tried using a Gmail. That's another thing that providers like Kickbox and other ones that do validation offer, is the ability to filter those out on the fly if you want to, or in a report. Next is email authentication. And a lot of people forget this. And years ago, maybe it wasn't as important and you didn't really have to do that. What is email authentication? It is basically showing these email providers or the recipient servers that you are safe, secure, and trustable. And I'm going to go into detail here because the first one is SPF, and it's not something you put on your skin to protect you from sun damage, right? It's called Sender Policy
Framework. I wanted to ask you about this because I feel like
Yeah.
these terms get thrown around, and I'm not sure people always know truly what they are. So yeah, do this. This is great.
Let's go through this and try to make it understandable. SPF is Sender Policy Framework. This means, let's say I'm sending emails from hankhoffmeyer.com, but I'm using MailChimp. The recipient server is going to say, this email is being sent by Hank, but MailChimp's actually sending it. Does MailChimp have permission to send this email is what it's asking for. Now, MailChimp and other providers, they're automatically going to do this SPF setup for you. And I contact our sister company, who I worked for 13 years. They do this automatically. Now, you may have another provider or you have your own server. Just make sure you have SPF set up. And that would be in, say, your hosting provider like GoDaddy. I always mention X, it's well known. You go into GoDaddy and you go into your DNS. If you're technical, you know what I'm talking about. If not, use ChatGPT, right? Or ask your email provider, how do I set this up? And then you're going to go in and put a text record in, and it's going to be the SPF record. It's going to identify, say, MailChimp as a sender for me is what it's doing to dumb it down. Then there's DKIM, Domain Keys Identified Mail. Simply said, this means that the email has not been altered or changed during transmission. It hasn't been hacked. It hasn't been injected with malware. There's end-to-end encryption. This is something that your provider, email provider, or you need to set up. Most times your provider will send you this information, or it'll be in your control panel. Go to GoDaddy, whatever hosting provider you have, enter these DNS records and validate it, and you can check it and make sure it's valid. And then the last one is called DMARC, Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Really, even though it's the longest acronym, it basically says, do you have SPF and DMARC set up? I mean, DKIM set up. And if you don't, what do we do with this email? What I always recommend is setting it up, and then there is pass, fail, and ignore, right? Kind of. And I would recommend just doing none, fail, and quarantine is what it would be, right? None, reject, and quarantine is the correct terms. Set it up as none. What this does is allow you to see if anybody's actually spoofing your emails. Maybe some company from a foreign country is sending emails on your behalf trying to steal information from people. You can actually see this. And a fun thing is you'll actually see, oh, looks like the dev team is actually sending out a newsletter. We didn't even know about it. And you can see that they're doing that and what email address they're using and what domain they're using. But then you can send it to quarantine or reject. And this is going to be something that's required. The reason why I mentioned these three is these are required right now from Yahoo, Microsoft, and Gmail.
Mm.
If you don't have this, pretty much your emails are going to go to spam. Now, you might have a listener that'll say, well, Hank, some of my recipients are still getting the email and they're replying to it. I know they're getting my email. What do you mean? Sure, if somebody's highly engaged and they're opening and clicking your emails, they'll continue to get the email. Now, somebody going to your website and filling out a form and you're using verification for Kickbox, then what happens is they don't get that welcome email. They don't get subsequent emails because it's going to spam. Yeah. Another item you can add, and this is not required, it's optional, it's called BIMI, Brand Indicators for Message Identification. Now, if you look and say Gmail is the perfect way to describe this, you may see either a logo or like a K for Kickbox in a circle, like a red circle. The reason why it would be a logo is because BIMI is set up. Again, you have to have SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. You do have to have a verified domain. There's a couple options, and it does cost some money, anywhere from $800 to $1,500. You may need to have a what's called a VMC certificate, and then to go through this process of verifying you own the domain, right, which is critical for this. And really what that does is it provides a way for users to trust you in the inbox, that your domain showing up, okay, this is Best Buy, this is their subject line, I probably can trust them, I'll open it. Whereas if it's just Hank Hoffmeyer and Assistant H, can you trust that? Maybe, maybe not. But those are the authentication methods and things that you need to worry about when it comes to sending emails, right? And I mentioned Microsoft, Yahoo, and Gmail. I like to call them Yahoo-Soft. But we can also say Maggie, which would be Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Yahoo. Yeah. Because Apple and my phone's right here. And let's say I put it face down. I'm not even looking at it, Jesse, and you send me an email. And I'm using the built-in email app from Apple, right? And I can use that with Gmail, Yahoo, etc. It's going to count it as an open, whether or not I even looked at my email or not. I may never look at your email, but it's going to count as an open. A lot of people like to look at opens as a metric of success. In other words, at 20, 30, 40% open rate, where that's kind of almost a dead metric. It's still okay to look at it. Realistically, you want to look at clicks and make sure that people are clicking your email.
Well, let me go back a paragraph. I just want to make sure that I grabbed that, because that was a lot of sort of dense definitions, but this is my simplistic way that I heard you. So the SPF is a text file in your domain settings.
Or host. Most times it's the host.
It's the host.
But it could be on the domain. It just depends on how your website's set up. But 9 times out of 10, it's the host.
And the DKIM is an encryption that's running in order to make sure that contents are not altered during send.
It's making sure there's encryption, yes.
Okay. DMARC is essentially a policy that runs sort of if-thens, that if it sees these signals, do this with the email. Either let it go through, possibly quarantine it, possibly put it into the spam folder. And then BIMI, in my weird brain, it's the blue check mark on Twitter. You're paying in order to get a brand trust signal that shows up right next to your message in the inbox. Is that Jesse's dumbing it down
I like it. What do we call those? Cliff notes. Yeah.
The Cliff Notes version. Okay. So this is before the Apple thing on the 30% is a really interesting thing. Let me ask you really quick on a sidetrack before we come back to that. What do you see companies messing up? Or that's too negative. What's the biggest opportunity you see that companies have when it comes to getting what you just said with all those settings right?
When it comes to getting the settings right, is they're not actually implementing it. They don't have it. They don't know that they need to implement it, and then making sure it's correct. Yeah. So just straight up awareness, just knowing that there's these pieces that need to be put into place. Yep. Is the obstacle? And there's a tool. This is important, about my.email. If you go there and you recently set up or you want to check your authentication, that's a good tool, about my.email. It will tell you if you have SPF, DMARC, and DKIM, and even BIMI set up correctly. Oh, that's a great tip. So if you're, shout out to anybody that's new to the marketing team, on the operations team, trying to get a quick read on things, you could go to there and get an immediate readout on your own, or potentially even competitors or somebody like that. Yeah, somebody could start in a marketing team and they're head of marketing and they were told, yeah, we set up authentication years ago or last month. You may want to verify that. Yeah. Does it change over time? Is there anything that would alter
those settings, or once they're set up, they're permanent?
Maybe you change the domain you're sending from or something like that. But usually they're kind of permanent. Or maybe you moved from MailChimp to Constant Contact and you never updated your records, right?
Yeah.
That could be a huge red flag and cause it to fail.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people tend to use Microsoft email still. A lot of times, sometimes it's hard to set up something with what's called IP lookups because every domain has one or more IPs. And I believe that the SPF record holds only about 10. So in other words, if you're using Microsoft, I think it automatically uses like 6 to 8, I think. And then if you're adding 5 more, it's going to put you over that limit and it will fail. And there's workarounds for that. We won't get into that because it's like highly technical.
Yeah, interesting. And I know, from my experience in SaaS companies, not, the entire company is often not using the same email platform. So you may have marketing team using MailChimp. You may maybe having the product team using Railgun or something to shoot out system messages. You could be having sales team using other outreach techniques for outbound. So I would say that's the thing that also strikes me with that is it's not just validating one system. It should be across the company, I would guess.
Yeah, and if you're using many platforms, make sure you're synchronizing your unsubscribes because you don't want to get in trouble there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay, let's go back then. Thanks for letting me kind of like circle around for a second there.
Yeah.
Can you get us back into Apple with open rates when this is going? I've seen this in a number of articles. People will talk about this, that your open rate as a metric is no longer as meaningful as it was because your phone is auto opening anything it gets. So what do we do with open rate? Like, do people still quote benchmarks and say, oh, if you're in this type of business, you should be having a 40% open rate? Or do you even think about that, or you just throw the whole thing out?
You can eyeball it, and it's a good way, if your list isn't holistically changing a lot as an informal metric. If you're steadily in the 20s or going up, then you're doing well. But if all of a sudden there's a big drop or a big spike, you might want to look into why that happened. If you added a bunch of people that may be using Apple, then you obviously know there'd be some jumps, but most people don't. They usually steady grow over time because you should be using permission-based email marketing. In other words, never buying a list and adding a million email addresses that you purchased, because there's a lot of issues there. Because not only does Yahoo!Soft require that you have this authentication, they're also looking at your spam complaint levels. If they're over 0.3% or 3% per thousand of each of these domains, not overall, you will be dinged again and also cause what's called IP or domain reputation damage. The same thing with your bounces, right? And that's why Kickbox is important in validating emails. If you send too many emails that are invalid and they bounce, again, that hurts your reputation as well. And what I'm talking about here is every time you send an email, let's say I'm using hankhoffmeyer.com and I send to 100 Gmail subscribers. I like to use Gmail because they're the most strict with their algorithms, etc. And then over time, 50% or 50 of them are either bouncing, marking me as spam, or worse, unsubscribing and even ignoring my emails. That is a bad signal, and people don't realize that. That's why list hygiene is important. If that starts happening and my credit score is 50, again, I'm going to run into trouble, and Gmail, Yahoo, whatever server is going to say, Hank's not a really reputable sender. Let's send more and more of your emails, his emails, to the spam folder. And that's what happens. And you mentioned, like, what is the biggest thing that marketers either have an opportunity for with authentication, but the biggest overall opportunity is value, right? Making sure that you're sending emails that your subscribers want, that they opted into, that's educative, informative, or helpful in some way, not what you as a marketer saying, I have the best email in the world and I love it, everybody else should love it too. Yeah. Make sure you're sending relevant emails and testing, split testing. A lot of these platforms have ways of taking a portion of your list and testing it to see if it's going to do well. Because authentication is important, verification is important, and your IP and your domain reputation is important. I don't mention IP a lot because usually smaller senders are going to be on what's called a shared IP, like MailChimp, Constant Contact. They have a bunch of IPs that all their customers share. But if
Yeah.
you're a huge sender and you're sending millions of emails a day, it might be worth looking into what's called a dedicated IP, having your own IP address. Then
Mhm.
you're holistically responsible for the reputation of that IP address. And how like to mention this is years and years and years ago, when spammers would sign up for a service, they would send out spam, and it would be the IP reputation that made it an issue, right? Okay,
Yeah.
they're on this IP address, they're sending spam. Any emails coming from this IP, let's block. Then they would just say, okay, well, I'm leaving this ESP and I'm going to go over here to this one now and burn their IPs.
Right.
Then they burn those IPs and they go somewhere else. What happened is there's been a change. Number one, these providers start blocking people. And then two is the powers that be said, well, let's start looking at the domain. Okay, if they use this provider and they're sending crappy emails, it's gonna that IP, that domain reputation is gonna follow you over to this other provider, and that's what's happened over time.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. That was a helpful summary, because I know I've looked at that in the past and tried to track like why did this reputation, why did it persist? Can you talk a little bit about list hygiene? Because I feel like this kind of gets us into like, if I've got a 10,000 member list or 100,000 or a million, doesn't really matter. And I want to make sure that what you're describing isn't happening, that people aren't ignoring, spamming, just throwing in junk. Then, I've heard that, well, you want to clean your list and take away people that are actively not engaged. But I'm getting false signals now from my phone, or from their phone rather, that are auto opening. Like, how do I approach hygiene on my list in light of all of that?
Right. And the advice can be generic, and it could also depend on what industry you're in and how many times you're sending an email. If you send an email once a quarter versus once a month versus once a week, your timeframes can be different. But let's say average, you want to look at 6 months. If somebody hasn't opened and clicked an email in 6 months, it might be good to put them into a sequence and asking people if they still want to receive your emails. Now, I've seen this done well on people that are in our space, because we all know, marketers know what's happening. And there's a newsletter I belong to that every now and then they'll say, hey, we all know that Microsoft, Yahoo, and all these other providers want to see engagement. Please click this link if you want to still receive our emails. I actually got one from a well-known brand doing something similar, saying, we noticed that you may not have engaged with our emails in a while. If you still want to receive our emails, please click this link to let us know to keep sending you emails. Now, that was great. Wonderful. I think the mistake they made is I clicked on the link and I went to their homepage. That's it. Just dropped on their homepage. You should have, I think, in my opinion, have a specific landing page that's simple, that just says, thank you for clicking on the link in the email, or thank you for letting us know you still want to receive emails from us. Now, if you want to put an offer on that page, or put something else, picture of a clown, whatever you want, just make it so that, like I said, it's valuable, right? Don't just drop somebody to the homepage and maybe they're going to buy something, or you were just lazy to set something up. Maybe you do something where you sell something that people don't buy too often. Like I used to work with a client that sold reading glasses and also regular glasses. I don't know, if you wear glasses at all or not, but I do. How often would I buy glasses? Maybe the most once a year. Why should I be sending somebody an email once a week, which is what this client was doing? We moved to once a month, but then we also started limiting how much promotion was in there, started providing information like blog posts about organic health for your eyes, how to clean your glasses, repair them, gave them more value to stay in touch with them. So basically I guess I want to give some advice. Like, if you don't send emails too often because you say we only send once a quarter because that's the industry we're in, find ways to keep in touch with them and send them an email a little bit more often, so that you do have that data and those metrics. And then use that sequence of emails. Send them one email asking if they still want to receive it, waiting a week, 2 weeks. If they didn't open that first email, send them a second one. It's kind of like, are we breaking up? ? The first one, right? Then they don't open that. The next one's like, here's the divorce papers, right? And then you have some information in there. And then the last one, if they didn't open the previous two, is signed, sealed, and delivered. We will remove you from now. Hey, maybe email's not your thing. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn, whatever you want to do. Try to promote that as well, because maybe they're getting them, or they got that last one and they opened it, but they still don't want to engage with your emails. Maybe social media is their thing. Then follow through, and then you can use automation to automatically remove them or manually remove them. The beauty is, folks, you can add them back at any time. That's the thing, is they can come back at any time. Some marketers want to hold on to those emails and say, they're going to open up at some time, and we need to be in their inbox, even if they don't open, because now we also have the AI summaries where Apple is automatically summarizing these emails for you as well. You have to fight that battle too.
Mhm. Can you talk about that for a second? What does that look like for people that may not have experienced that?
Right. And there's no telltale way as to exactly how it's going to look for each individual person. I can look at my phone right now, and any emails that I've gotten while we've been talking, it would summarize it for me. And
Mhm.
it can even summarize that one specific email if I open it at the top. Play around with your copy. Your copy is more important than ever, making sure it's
Mhm.
concise and valuable. This way, the summary is going to reflect what you have in your content. If you're using a lot of fluff words and you're not really getting to the point, keep in mind that that could be pulled into the AI summary. And, there's a lot of jokes going around because some of it's kind of funny, or, there's been like two I've heard where somebody had a death in the family and the summary was just hilarious. And it's still a work in progress.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be perfect, but that is something that we're all going to have to learn together because it's kind of newer. Gmail's starting to summarize emails now. If I gave you my work email address and you're sending me emails, it's going to have the summary at the top. Make sure that you're optimizing for that. It's almost like SEO in a way.
Yeah. The the AI summary with the death in the family, which is very, I mean, it was probably tragic for the person experiencing that. It reminds me of the story from years ago of, I think it was Target's auto coupons, where I think it was the woman was pregnant, and that coupon or something showed up, said, "It looks like you're pregnant. Do you need these products?" And the husband or somebody didn't know, and that's how they found out. And it was just like the system is trying to be so smart. You've got to, it can follow you up. You got to be smarter than the system. Yeah.
Exactly.
The with sending, I'm curious because I've read recently around long form making a bit of a comeback in a lot of different channels. Have you seen that with email? I know Kickbox probably has access to a lot of data. I'm not sure how much of that you can share, but do you have any insights on, like, in terms of getting engagement so that you do have a list that stays good and people are excited to, or at least accepting of receiving your emails? Is long form back for email marketing, or is that largely other content forms?
It depends. It
Hmm.
depends on what industry you're in, your audience. I do a monthly newsletter, and it's tools I found that made me productive if I'm going to be speaking somewhere, or takeaways from conferences I've been to and other blog posts I've read. That's a little bit more long form. And I
Yeah.
find that people tend to like that. But if it's something where you're selling a product and service, and you only sell one or two products and service, not like Macy's where you can put a bunch of products,
Yeah.
it's not worth having long form. It's not
Yeah.
worth putting a full product review in an email. Maybe
Yeah.
put the first two sentences and getting the click to get them to read more.
Yeah.
I still think that FOMO wins out, especially with email, because we have to get that click through to show engagement, right?
Yeah.
Whereas we're not looking at opens much anymore. You could say, hey, we recently wrote a blog post with the top 3 ways to whatever, right? And you could say number 1, number 2, and then say to read number 3, head over to our blog and get
Hmm.
them to go over to the blog, right? You're giving them the summary, not AI summary, your summary, and then click here to get the third one, which helps with that engagement. I think that people are willing to do that, but to specifically answer the question, it really depends. And also make sure you're testing and
Yeah.
finding out if that's what, and I'm always a fan of polling your audience. Do a survey once a year
Mm.
and ask people, hey, do you generally like longer form content or shorter form content? And let them decide. And people tend to say, oh, well, we know what our subscribers want. No, you don't.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you might get mixed. Then what you can do is say, okay, 50% of our audience or 49% of our audience wants long form and 51 want short form. Then you split that audience into 2 and you put them on 2 different lists and you react accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. Testing is always the answer. Like asking and testing. Yes. 100%. I wanted to ask for a second about regulation or changes or anything you may see coming up in the market around this. I mean, GDPR has been with us for a long time. For those who may not be aware of it, that's the Europe started legal process, or not legal process, legal requirement for people to opt in and not get spammed too. There's CCPA, which is the California one, which has been more recent. I'm curious if you see any other kind of changes, standards, or whatever else coming down the pike for the world of email.
I think it's all going to move towards like what GDPR is, and I would just plan for that. And the best advice I've ever heard from somebody on a legal team was always follow the most strict there is, even if it's not in your country. In other words, follow GDPR, because then you're covered for CCPA, you're covered for Castle Now and all the other ones that are out there, and every state can come up with theirs. Because the thing is, I can market to someone in the European Union without knowing it, and then I'm on the hook for that. Same thing with California, is if you're emailing somebody that resides in California and you didn't follow the CCPA, you can get in trouble, and the punishment's pretty serious. I would say just make sure you're doing the right things and make sure that you're getting those opt-ins. I mentioned at the beginning, don't ever buy a list. And more importantly, not more importantly, but also important, if you go to, say, a conference and you sponsored the conference and they say, we'll give you a list for $2,000 of everybody who's attended. Now, how many of those are going to actually come to your table if you have a table? Not all of them, right? But then you do have the ability to email all of them. But did they specifically opt in to get your emails? Probably not, unless the conference is doing it right. Then you run into they don't know who you are. They don't remember your brand. They may mark that message as spam, ignore it, or, and all those things. And it may bounce. They may have provided a bad email address. That's why it's always good to make sure that you have the best possible quality list you can. And with those folks that you meet at conferences too, most times what I recommend is emailing them one-off or reaching out through LinkedIn and asking if you can add them to your email newsletter. Not every marketer wants to hear that if they've been going to shows and collecting lists of hundreds and hundreds of people. I did a talk in Birmingham, UK, and I got the list of people who opted in. I sent them a personalized email video, and I personalized each one, 120 people that I got the opt-in from, and I just said who I was, gave them the key takeaways and a copy of the deck and a recording of the session afterwards. And I asked them, I have a newsletter, would you want to sign up for that? I asked them to stay in touch. It was a one and done, and I asked them to stay in touch. I'm not saying everybody wants to do that, but that is a good tactic.
So those were folks that because you were a speaker, the event had probably had something that said, if you tick this box, or maybe we pre-tick this box, you're giving permission for our sponsors to email market you. But you said, I want more permission than that. And so I'm going to do this video tactic.
Because if I just said, thank you for coming to the IREX conference, the name of the conference, I wanted to follow up and tell you more about what Kickbox does, they might not remember all that. They may have came to my session, sat in the back, and been on their phone the whole time, and they probably might not have remembered me. But majority of them may have, and I got a lot of replies, saying it was great and all this, and they appreciated the follow up. But there will be those handful that don't remember who you are, don't care who you are, and they're going to mark it as spam, unsubscribe, ignore it, which hurts your domain reputation, which is what we mentioned. That's what you're looking out for. First and foremost, staying legal, right? So you don't get fined. And then making sure that you are keeping your domain health in check so that your emails get to the inbox.
I love that in the sense that, or in multiple senses. One is just that it's true permission marketing, because once somebody says actively, yes, no, I want to hear from you, I'm going to be more likely now to open your emails because I kind of made this mental decision that I want to hear from you. Also, I feel like SaaS companies, digital product companies, there's so many venues where you get that, when somebody registers for filling out a review, they fill out a trial, they attend a trade show, they do something where they're kind of giving third-party sponsors permission to market to them, but they don't really want it. And so there's so many scenarios that a company may find itself where they technically have GDPR opt-in, but do they really have the actual buy-in to not get burned in the relationship? Exactly. And so I really respect, kind of going out and doing the hard work to confirm the relationship, basically.
Yeah, I like to always say, if you're using a purchase list or you're using these conference lists, and of course you're going to get the flash in the pan moment, right? You may get some sales, you may get some opens, but you're hurting yourself for the future. Your domain and your IP reputation and your brand reputation is going to start to sink, and your email marketing efforts will slope downwards, and you might even start wondering why. Unless you're listening to this episode, you know why. But if you didn't, you'll start saying, well, why are open rates so low? Why is nobody clicking our emails? It's because they're not getting them.
Yeah. Okay, this is a big question, so you can answer to the extent you want. If you could wave a magic wand and fix kind of one thing with how most SaaS software, digital companies, whatever, do their email, what would that one thing be?
It's going to be looking at the program and making sure you're providing value while sending authenticated emails. That's simply what it is. And it's not one simple thing, but yes, just making sure you're looking at your program and you're set up correctly as far as setting yourself up for success. First thing is authentication. Sure, verification is important, but authentication is the king. And then your content and the value you offer is going to be the queen. And after that, hopefully everything just goes smoothly after that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think can we talk for a second? I think you've got an offer for the Growth Stage audience today. We were just chatting for a second before we hopped onto the call. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Right. People that come to Kickbox and they sign up, they get 100 free test credits. What I'd like to offer is using Growth Stage as a coupon code when you go to purchase credits, maybe after you used 100 if you want, it's up to you. I want to offer 1,000 free credits. In other words, especially if you're a small company, it'll take you a while to get through 1,000 free credits. You can test out our integrations, our API, upload list. There's a way to do one. We call it single verification. You can go in and just do one at a time, test it out. But yeah, use the code Growth Stage and get 1,000 free credits. I have that set through the end of the year, which is the end of December of 2025.
Awesome. Thank you, man, so much for doing that for the audience. And just to kind of poke at it a little bit, because I haven't used Kickbox yet, although now I'm going to have 1,000 free credits too. The credit is the API validation of the email. So somebody's filling out my free trial form and it double checks this is a legit email and all of that. So that's actually, especially for a company that may be either smaller or on the B2B side, where there tends to be less volume of lead generation. Yeah, that could be a substantial runway to get somebody testing this whole methodology, right?
Yeah, and we don't charge for unknown results. There are some servers that may be a temporary issue, servers down, or they just flat out refuse to talk to us. It's called unknown. We don't charge for those. We also do email deliverability consulting. And if you feel like you have a domain reputation issue, or you think your authentication is not set up correctly, and you feel like a majority of your emails are going to spam, we can provide a success plan and strategy to get you back on track.
Man, that is so valuable, and I'm not just buttering you up because you're on the podcast. I've just been in numerous scenarios where like email deliverability for the marketing operations or sales team can be, you never think about it till it's wrong. And then all of a sudden it's a fire and you're trying to figure out, how do I put this out? Yeah. And so that's a great shout out for folks that may run into that in the future.
Yeah, think of it like the credit score, right? You tank your credit score, it takes a long time to come back, right? It takes a while to get down to a low level, and it takes a long time to climb back up that mountain. Same thing with email deliverability. Once you know there's a problem, it's hard to get back on track again.
Oh, that's so good. Where can people catch up with you, Hank, if they want to try and catch you somewhere online after this?
I always like to say, if you search Hank Hoffmeyer on Google, I have really good SEO. I show up probably for like the first 2 pages of results with everything that has to do with me, all my social media channels. The only thing I ask, if you're going to connect on LinkedIn, just make sure you personalize the invite. I have this rule where I don't accept blind invites, but I'm a marketer, so I will reply and ask you if we've met before, because I have a bad memory, or I'll offer to have a call with you. And what's funny is I keep track of that, and I think the metric's still around. I only get a 40% response to that. In other words, it's just a lot of salespeople trying to pitch me. I even get responses to my reply saying, "Thank you for accepting my invite. Here's my sales pitch," when I didn't even accept it. But if you reach out and you say, I met you on the show, but I still may actually want to have a call with you, because I really covet having a valuable network where I can help you, you can help me, and we can have a wonderful LinkedIn relationship together. Otherwise, follow me on TikTok, Instagram, all the social channels. I'm always putting stuff out. It's not all related to email. I do a lot of tips around digital marketing. I'm still trying to get my podcast going again, Hank's Marketing and Business Tips. There's probably about almost 300 episodes that are there historically. I hope to definitely get that back up and running. And Jesse, I'll have you on too as well.
Oh, I would love that, man. Well, thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it. Thanks everybody else for joining us, for being with us here on Growth Stage. Again, Hank Hoffmeyer from Kickbox. Really glad to have him here. I'm Jesse Poliato. I'm your host. I get to be a part of the digital product community by doing this today, and I'm so pumped about that. And I hope you all have a good week, and we will catch you next time on the Growth Stage.